What is the greatest way someone has attempted to humiliate or harass you, which ended up backfiring? Hopefully this doesn't get buried, but here goes. My best guy friend had moved out of his fiance's in his house after a 7-year relationship. He's kind of a sucker, but a good person. He rented a small house down the street from his mom, and since the fiance owed him a shit ton of money, she gave him a washer and a dryer, a table, etc. He was trying to keep the relationship alive, as well as get some much-needed space. He really didn't want to break up with her. One day, she decides that he's cheating on her. He wasn't. He was at my house drinking and playing poker with my brother and a few other guy friends. She flips the fuck out on him when he gets home. She has a house key and is lurking in the house, refusing to come out when he gets there. Says she's waiting on a guy friend of hers to bring a trailer and a dolly so she can take her shit out of his house. My pal calls the cops. A bunch of bullshit goes on there, but she leaves before they can get there. She then tries to file personal protection orders on him and his mother. She lied about both of them threatening her life in order to do so. My pal decided to contest the PPO and take her to court. In Michigan, you can have someone who isn't a lawyer speak for you in court. He asked me. I couldn't object to any of the other attorneys' arguments. He made some outrageous accusations, even asking me if my pal had ever tried to sleep with me. And when I told him no, on the stand, he then asked me if my pal was gay, but I could question every witness, including the fiancé. She went up to the witness stand last. As soon as she got up there, she went into a crazy crying fit. I mean, sobbing, blowing snot bubbles, the whole 9 yards. My question was this: "Fiancé, what did you bring into my pal's house with you?" She replied, "An iron billy club my cop friend gave me." I asked her if it was in plain sight, and she stupidly replied, "No, I had it up the sleeve of my sweatshirt." The judge called a halt to the proceedings and dismissed all of the PPO attempts. He then assigned her 50 hours of anger management classes, and when she shrieked, he threw her in jail for contempt of court. As she was being led away, she said to me, "Bitch, I'm gonna get you." I asked for a PPO on her right then and there, and it was granted on the spot. Instant success kid here. TLDR, crazy woman put her own foot in her mouth in court, reversing the original charges she sought out onto her. My ex pulled similar stunts in our divorce and custody fight. She claimed in affidavits that I was suicidal, homicidal, violent, had anger management issues, abusing prescription and illegal drugs. Basically, everything short of molesting our child, which my attorney expressed surprise at. As we walked into court on the first day, she said that if our child had been a female, we'd be fighting such accusations. Her attorney also tried very hard to portray me as a stereotypical military vet with deep emotional problems. So my ex petitions the court to have me undergo a psych eval. The judge looked at me and asked, "Mr. Ditka's mustache, how do you feel about this?" I said that I had no problem with it, but it would probably be a good idea if the ex had one too. He found the idea delightful and even allowed my ex to choose the doctor to administer it. So we go through the psych eval thing. This was a total of about 6 or 8 hours in the doc's office over the course of several days. The day before the divorce trial starts, we get the results back. Mr. Ditka's mustache has mild symptoms of situational depression, which is no surprise, as his wife has been conducting at least one and as many as several affairs, blah blah blah. There is no indication of suicidal or homicidal tendencies, nor drug abuse, nor violence, nor antisocial behavior. He's basically a good guy going through a shitty divorce. Mrs. Ditka's mustache has a non-specific borderline personality disorder, a narcissistic personality disorder, and 3 of the 5 standardized tests used to evaluate her were invalidated because she lied on them. Here's the very cool part. When I went to settle the bill at the doc's office, his nurse pulled me aside and said, "We don't get emotionally involved with our clients, Mr. Ditka's mustache, but everyone in this office is pulling for you." Apparently, the ex had stormed in and lit the entire staff up in spectacular fashion over the diagnoses. My attorney's secretary also lets me know that my ex's attorney's secretaries, seems that these folks talk outside of class a lot. We're very hopeful that my ex would get ramrodded by the court. In the end, I was granted custody of my son, and the judge included some very sharp language about my ex's testimony and integrity that I am told will be my primary weapon should she ever choose to contest any aspect of either the divorce or custody rulings. My favorite quote: "Her answers were evasive, disingenuous, and, at times, breathtakingly unbelievable. Thanks, Your Honor. TLDR, X went from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane in the courtroom. I was like the mighty willow who bends but did not break." Okay. I have a different login at work. My boss has been a bit of a control freak since we hired him a couple years ago. Largely, we all put up with him, though the people he supervises can all do the job better than he. Not that unusual, even in a technical field like mine. Anyway, he got frustrated one evening when he saw me helping another coworker with their stuff, and let me know that we would have a meeting in the morning with his boss to redefine my workload. See, if he didn't tell me to help employee X that he dislikes with their work, I shouldn't be helping with their work. I guess I have more team spirit than my boss. Next morning at the appointed time, I stick my head in the door of boss's boss's office and say, "Do we have a meeting?" with a knowing grin. Boss's boss says, "Is boss here yet?" And I say, "Yeah, I just saw him, I'll go get him." So the boss airs a couple petty grievances and then says, "There have been some times where I am setting something up and you know it and you leave early. If you know I'm working on setting up process XYZ in the afternoon, can you stick around to help?" And I knew I was gold. Process XYZ is something my boss should have learned how to do over 2 years ago. So I raise my eyebrows and carefully say with as little scorn and derision as humanly possible, "If I were to stick around and help out, do you think you could learn process XYZ so I don't have to stay late next time?" And my boss replies with, "Yes, of course. Just so you know, the only reason I don't know process XYZ is because at all my previous companies were used process ABC." And I knew I had him. 5 minutes later, I walked out of boss's office grinning because my boss just embarrassed himself in front of his boss and didn't even know it. I knew that right then, boss's boss was saying to boss, "You don't know XYZ? That's something you should know." And voila! A couple months later, my boss is learning new tricks, including XYZ. I know that this is the guy filling out my evals, and the three of us know I let him hang, and I just cannot bring myself to care. The whole company knows his history, and we have made a habit of working around him. So fuck it. My first long-term boyfriend cheated on me during our senior year of high school, then led me on for months by saying, "I want to be with you, I just need some time apart. We're still together, I just want to see other people too." Like any socially inept, shy, insecure high schooler, I went along with it for quite some time before calling it quits for good. However, my ex had promised me long before that he would take me to the senior prom that year, no matter what happened between us. In the weeks leading up to prom, I order a modest-looking dress online, buy my ticket, book a hair appointment, the whole shebang. So 1 week before that prom night, I find out from mutual friends that he's taking the 14-year-old who he cheated on me with to the prom instead of me. And I'd also been told that my ex wasn't going to tell me about it. He'd been planning on letting me buy a dress, spend the entire prom day getting ready, and then he was going to stand me up on prom night. So I asked his recently single best friend to take me, because we'd already been friends for years before and he'd just broken up with his girlfriend. I returned the modest dress I'd bought online and take the money to a local dress shop. I buy a sexy, flaming red prom dress that shows off my legs, back, and bust. Sky-high black stilettos. I forgo the intricate hairstyle for a sexy haircut instead. I looked good. I showed up for the pre-prom dinner at a restaurant where my date, his friend and his girlfriend, and my ex and his new girlfriend are waiting at the table. I walk down the path leading to the table like it's a catwalk. Every eye in the restaurant is on me. For 30 seconds, I commanded an entire room. I danced the night away with my prom date while my ex fumed to himself in the corner, refusing to dance with his girl. He left early. My date and I go back to my house where we have the longest, most intimate conversation of my life. We talk about our lives, our childhoods, who we both are, and who we both want to be. Everything. We talk until the sun comes up. My ex's best friend and I are now happily married. So really, every day that I live is a day that my ex's plan to humiliate me is backfiring. I was born for this thread as well. Here are a few. 6th grade to 7th grade, I sat with the Yu-Gi-Oh table. Let's face it, at such a young age, it was a fantastic card game, and a lot of people in middle school agreed. While we were the center of attention to bullies, we also had 3 tables overflowing with people who wanted to play cards with us. It turned into a long row of tables with pretty much any card game you can name, but that didn't stop people from annoying us with their idiotic insults. Now, I played baseball with one of the popular kids named Corey. He was secretly a nerd, and I encouraged him to embrace that side of him. He also happened to hang out with all those bullies. So one day, they come walking up. Everyone in his little group starts making fun of us, calling us names, and Corey was just grinning at me. Finally, one of them says, "Can you believe those nerds, Corey?" And Corey goes to me, "Yo man, can I play around with you?" He then sits in front of me and pulls out his Yu-Gi-Oh cards complete with card covers. The look on everyone's faces. That alone made my year. By 9th grade, I received a new title. I was no longer that nerd. I was that quiet kid that showed no emotion. A lot of bullies gave up on bullying me. Halfway through the year, I was known as that really nice, quiet kid that everyone wished would talk more. I received a reputation I never wanted. People who made middle school a living hell for me now tried to invite me to parties because I was chill. It did have its perks, though. There was this douchebag that just didn't seem to get it. I don't react to bullies, but he was so persistent till eventually he shoved me into a wall. I just kinda stood there grinning while the people he expected to start laughing at me surrounded him. That was a good day for me as well. I got the ultimate revenge. Bullies from middle school that I still despised with a passion stood up for me and beat up another bully. Then they got suspended for beating him up. My dad used to work in the maintenance department at a very expensive and very high-class boys-only high school. It was actually a pretty respectable job, requiring a plethora of trade qualifications and a working brain. He was pretty committed to the job and often pulled overtime on the weekends. But because it was a rich school in a rich area, there was a lot of snobbery involved. Kids' parents were assholes. The kids were practically uncontrollable. Dad handled it all by just being incredibly good at his job and never getting mad, just even. So, one Saturday morning, he goes into the workshop on campus to build some new tables and desks. At 9 o'clock, he gets in, makes coffee, and gets set up, before turning on the extractor fans in the workshop that remove the sawdust. As a side note, you're legally allowed to operate machinery like this from 7 o'clock in the morning onwards, in terms of noise pollution restrictions. Cue a guy, most likely a parent of one of the boys at the school, storming over from his house in the property behind the workshop, in his dressing gown. Absolutely flips his shit, screaming at Dad to turn the machinery off. Dad just stands his ground, explains that he's allowed to be running it, and waited until mid-morning out of courtesy. That's not good enough, and this guy starts making threats along the lines of, "They know me at the college. I know people. I can have you sacked. Who is your supervisor?" Dad says, "I can give you the maintenance supervisor's number," and hands the guy a business card. Guy pulls out his mobile and dials the number. He's staring Dad in the face, still pumped up and ready to start bagging him out to the supervisor. Dad's phone rings. He pulls it out, answers it, and says, "Scotch_Carb Senior, maintenance supervisor." The guy flipped his shit completely, threw the card back at Dad, and stormed out. This is something my father did. So at the time, my dad was working at an advertising company or something. I forget. It's not really important. What is important is that it was a very professional environment. Every day, he'd put on a fancy schmancy suit and tie and work in a very fancy schmancy building. One day, a new employee was promoted to his floor or something like that. The new guy was pretty young, like fresh out of college almost. Turns out there were two other guys who worked with my dad that went to the same college as the new guy. I'll call them Ted and Teddy. Immediately, the new guy started to look up to them. He'd go to them for advice and whatnot. After about 3 days, Ted and Teddy decided to play a prank on the new guy. So they decide they should tell him that next Friday was Hawaiian Shirt Day. But of course it wasn't. They tell my dad about it beforehand and ask if he can email him about it too, so it looks like everyone knows about it. My dad says he'll do it, so my dad emails the new guy about Hawaiian Shirt Day. Then he emails his boss and fills him in on the situation. But instead of just ratting out Ted and Teddy, he and his boss organize an actual Hawaiian Shirt Day and tell everyone in the office except Ted and Teddy. Meanwhile, my dad tells Ted and Teddy that the coming Friday is corporate picture day, so they'll dress super fancy. The picture of my dad's whole office, dressed in Hawaiian shirts, except 2 dudes in the back wearing fancy suits, is priceless. Had a guy steal a parking spot from me outside of my old job a while back. I was in a beater pickup, he in a rather nice BMW. I did the what the fuck face, and he walked over and said, "My car is nice and should be seen up front by the building. Go park your piece of shit at the other end of the lot." That guy? Yeah, he was my afternoon interview for a sales job. We sat down and he didn't recognize me, so I decided it couldn't hurt to act like nothing was wrong. He could be a dickbag, but an effective salesman. 5 minutes into the interview, I knew I wouldn't hire him, even if he hadn't pulled his parking stunt. Just way too used car salesman slick and not professional salesman smooth. So I asked him what he drove. He bragged about his 3-year-old BMW and asked what I drove. Gave him the biggest shit-eating grin and said, "A Benz." I didn't. But today I drove my old pickup. Some asshole stole my spot and told me to park my piece of shit out back. The blood drained, and he tried to play dumb. I finally just said, he drove a car just like yours. I'll call you if we decide to hire you. My psycho ex-wife denied me visitation with my mentally disabled 27-year-old daughter for almost a year. In court, she pointed out that I am an alcoholic. In her own lawyer's notes provided to the court, it showed that I was in AA for 28 years and haven't had a drink since Reagan was president. The judge pointed out that I was a sober senior manager with 2 master's degrees who had never been arrested and was fighting to see my mentally disabled daughter. The judge asked if there was any reason why I shouldn't get to see her. When my ex opened her mouth, the judge actually said, "Sit down and shut the fuck up. It was a rhetorical question. I'm not granting visitation, I'm granting joint guardianship." When the ex went to speak again, the judge said, "How would you like me to make it sole guardianship? And if you aren't sure, it wouldn't be in your favor." I never even had to say a word. Just got done a 9-day visit with my daughter, whom I see every other weekend, and it only cost me $28,000. Still, I fought the good fight and won. Was in high school band and had a particular douche who had a brow like a caveman. Seriously, they almost stuck over his chin in the aggressiveness of one. He was making jokes with his buds, and some of them were directed at me. I ignored him, I was reading my book, and I was going to enjoy the damn thing. Well, my Cro-Magnon schoolmate did not enjoy that, so he started staring at me from across the band room. Sensing his disapproval of me ignoring his glorious jokes, I looked up and met his gaze. I winked. He did not like that one bit. So he picked up his mouthpiece. Trumpet mouthpieces are small, but they are bloody well fast, and hurled it at me. I ducked behind my music stand and felt it whiz over me. Luckily, or not, depending on your viewpoint, my band director was right behind me and got nailed in the back by it. In 2 seconds, he went from being the cool and relaxed band director to the red-faced fury of Apollo himself. Classmate was suspended, eventually quit, and never so much as looked at me again. Good year. TLDR, Neanderthals are dumb. In PE, when we ran track, the boys would run one way and the girls would run the other way, but we never crossed paths. Everyone went halfway on the track, then turned back and ran the other half, so there was no meeting of the boys and girls. Well, at the half, some popular girl thought it'd be hilarious to pants me, so she says, "Hey, come see, some girl told me to tell you something." 7th grade me was naive, so I didn't see what could go wrong besides the teacher seeing I was talking to a girl or something. So I go up to her, and out of nowhere she tries to pants me for some reason, but fails, and I just end up falling, which not many people saw. She settled with that and started laughing. Her friend saw what happened and decided to stand up for me, so she went up and pants the mean girl to get back at her. She accidentally pulled down everything, panties and all, and a lot more people saw. I thought it was some hilarious karma. TLDR, bitch wanted to see my dick, got her pants pulled down. Not me, but my mom. Before I was born, she worked at a US government office. There were many parties where military officers and the admins, secretaries, would attend. At one of these parties, one dude who was big on sexually harassing women on a normal day had a few too many to drink. He came up to my mom and pinched her ass and said, "I'd really love to get in your pants." Humiliated, she kept her cool but raised her voice and responded so the whole office could hear. "Why? Did you shit yours?" Silence. The dude's asshole puckered up and he turned red in the face, and didn't harass anyone for a long time after that. Meanwhile, across the room was her soon-to-be husband, my father, who heard the exchange. Impressed. Not long after this exchange, he asked my mom if she'd like to celebrate his divorce from his ex-wife and go on their first date. 3 months later, they were married, and still are to this day. I was born for this thread! In retrospect, my stories are actually pretty tame. Enjoy. I was in 7th grade taking advanced math with the 8th graders. A mentally disabled 8th grader did not like this. First story, he was throwing pieces of an eraser at me, and one of them hit one of those holographic binders, which belonged to the girl behind me, emitting the loudest zip I have ever heard. The teacher then had proof that something was happening, and the dipshit got in trouble. We had a sub-teacher one day, so dipshit started breaking a pencil. Ammo! Woo! After getting hit in the neck a couple of times, I picked up the few pieces he had thrown and brought them to the sub. I said, "Someone threw these at me." So dipshit yelled, "He's lying! I didn't do it!" See, I bet you're disappointed now. When I was in 8th grade, there was this kid that would always bully me. He stole shit from my locker, had his buddies hold me down and drew stuff on me, and would insult me constantly. One day, he decided that it would be absolutely hilarious to pants me in front of the entire school during lunch. You see, saggy pants were a fad at my school in 8th grade, and almost nobody wore their pants at their waist where it was supposed to be. Almost nobody except me. I, on the other hand, knew what the fuck a belt was. When that punk ass grabbed a handful of my Levi's in an attempt to yank them down, he ended up getting caught red-handed, molesting another dude in front of the entire school. It made that entire shitty school year worth it. This girl I sat by in art class in the 6th grade was one of those big, loud bullies. The kind that can talk shit all day but acts confused and cries when anyone is mean to her. Anyways, she was making fun of my new glasses one day and said really loud so the whole class could hear her, "Wow, they're really big." So I looked up and politely and loudly said, "Well, so are you, but I thought it would have been rude to say anything." That shut her up. My ex tried to fight a restraining order, tried to say everything I claimed was a lie. Basically, him, his mom, and his dad made asses of themselves in front of the judge. I think what sealed it, though, was his mom shrinking back from his raised hand while I sat quietly on the other side of the courtroom. His party was loud and rude, talking over each other and stuff. I had 2 witnesses with me and a signed statement from a third person. "I win, you fucking bitch."